He was not just a ruler, nor merely a prince of golden sands, he was a living verse wrapped in human form. Every breath he took seemed to whisper poetry into the wind, every glance carried the melody of an untold story. Sheikh Hamdan, known to the world as Fazza, was a paradox of majesty and tenderness, a king whose heart beat not for power, but for love, art, and the hidden symphonies of the soul. In his silence, there was music. In his words, there was eternity. He stood as proof that greatness is not built on thrones but on the quiet grace of feeling deeply in a world that fears emotion. His love was never loud. It flowed like desert rain, rare, but when it came, it transformed everything it touched. Fazza loved like a poet, not through possession but through perception. He saw beauty where others saw dust, found meaning in the flight of a falcon, and tenderness in the eyes of a horse. His love was not confined to people alone, it extended to the earth, the sky, and the unseen miracles between dawn and dusk. He carried a heart that refused to harden, even when surrounded by gold and grandeur. In every poem he wrote, a piece of his soul slipped out, soft, luminous, and painfully real. His verses were not written for applause, they were offerings, quiet confessions of a man who felt too much in a world that feels too little. When he wrote of loss, it wasn't just about heartbreak, it was about the fading sunsets of life, the echoes of dreams that never took form, the shadows left behind by moments that could never return. Through his words, he taught the world that poetry is not an escape from life, it is life itself, distilled into truth. Behind his royal smile, there lived a storm, a man torn between duty and destiny, between the crown that commanded him and the soul that yearned to be free. Yet he wore his struggles like a cloak of light, never letting the world see the weight he carried. His strength was not in dominance, but in the elegance of his restraint. Where others would roar to prove their might, Fazza would whisper and still be heard. He ruled not through fear but through affection, not through command but through connection. Every desert night seemed to listen to him, as if the stars leaned closer when he spoke. His relationship with silence was sacred. It was in stillness that he found his wisdom, a calm that could heal storms, a patience that could move mountains. The world saw his luxury, but few saw his loneliness. The world saw the throne, but few understood the poetry that pulsed beneath the gold, the gentle ache of a man who carried both heaven and heartbreak in his heart. He believed that love was not about possession, but liberation. To him, loving someone was to set them free, to bless them even in their absence. He once wrote, "The greatest love is the one that survives distance, silence, and time, because it lives not in touch, but in the soul." Such was the depth of Fazza's heart, boundless, tender, and quietly revolutionary. In a kingdom built on sand, he built his legacy on words that could never fade. His eyes, often lost in the horizon, seemed to hold conversations with eternity. Those who looked into them saw not just a prince, but a seeker, a wanderer of meanings, a dreamer of what love could be if freed from pride. Fazza's poetry was a bridge between two worlds, the royal and the real, the divine and the deeply human. He made emotion noble again, proving that vulnerability is not weakness but the highest form of strength. There were times when he walked through the desert alone, letting the wind become his only companion. In those moments, he wasn't the ruler of Dubai, he was simply a soul in dialogue with the universe. He understood that solitude was not emptiness, but expansion. It was where he met his truest self, where the poet in him held hands with the prince, and both his horses, his falcons, his writings, all carried traces of his essence. To him, motion was poetry, and loyalty was its rhyme. Every gallop across the dunes was a stanza, every sunrise over the desert a verse he silently recited to himself. His life was not merely lived, it was written, like a sacred text that nature itself seemed eager to read. But even in his radiance, Fazza carried the quiet ache of all poets, the burden of feeling too deeply, of understanding too much. He knew the beauty of love and the pain of impermanence. He knew that even the brightest stars must fade into dawn. And yet, he chose to keep loving, to keep writing, to keep believing in the magic of human emotion. That courage, the courage to stay open, made him more than a prince. It made him eternal. He often said through his writings that love is the only crown that never falls. Power can fade, fame can vanish, but the heart's truth, once spoken, becomes immortal. Fazza's legacy is not carved in marble or written in gold. It lives in the souls of those he touched, the hearts he inspired, the tears his poems quietly awakened. Those who knew him closely spoke of his humility, a rare light that made the mighty bow. Despite his stature, he listened more than he spoke. He loved hearing people's dreams, their fears, their smallest joys. In every conversation, he sought the heartbeat behind the words. He was a reminder that real kingship is not about being above others, but walking beside them with compassion and grace. The world still feels his presence in the silence between heartbeats, that sacred pause where love and longing meet. Fazza's spirit lingers not in monuments or portraits, but in the way people look at the sky and suddenly feel something wordless stirring inside them. He has become a feeling more than a figure, a living echo of beauty that refuses to die. In every grain of sand that glows under moonlight, his tenderness whispers softly, as if the desert itself remembers the poetry he left behind. There is an invisible majesty in the way his words travel across hearts that have never met him. Somewhere, a stranger reads his verses and weeps, not because they are sad, but because they are true. His poems are bridges between souls, binding hearts across oceans and languages. He made vulnerability divine. He made emotion regal. Fazza proved that a pen can rule longer than a sword, and that a heart open to love is mightier than any crown forged by human hands. In the quiet corridors of his soul, he must have wrestled